This actually does lead nicely into the two questions. And I posted the questions and the videos they came from in the description for today. So if anybody wanted to check out the videos or actually read the question, they came from the same person. They were in response to two different videos. They had two different questions, and I thought they were important enough to take up and talk about. The one had to do with the time. Does individuality persist after death? Was the name of the video, and his question was: you mentioned towards the end that when we die, we get to a place between death and birth. What is experienced? Do we have any control there? Time wouldn't exist. To me, the closest thing I can compare it to is sleep. We wake up in a flash. Can we choose what we become next as a form? Do our actions and thoughts have an impact on the world in the next life? Really sorry, all these questions just spilled out of my head unremittingly. No need to apologize, PC 1111, whoever that might be, and maybe you're here today. There is a space between death and birth, between the death and birth, just as there's a space in between dreams. There's a space in between the waking state, where you fall into dreams and then into deep sleep. No experience is ever stable and permanent. No experience is the ultimate reality. It's always just this flashing scene appearing on the screen of consciousness. Now, one might ask, and in fact, people have, on all the videos I've done about death and the meditation I did called The Eternal Moment Between, I've gotten comments about, you can't know that. Nobody can know that. How can anybody possibly know that? And it's a great question. How can anybody know that? I once heard Stephen Fry, a fellow I really admire, a great actor, a great philosopher, a very intelligent and educated man, who said, anybody who tells you they know what happens after death is either a fool or a liar. Well, I don't know which one I am. I'm not a liar, so I must be a fool. How do you know? How does anybody know? Right? I haven't had a near-death experience. And even a near-death experience isn't going to tell you the same thing. If I walk into a cave and I've got a rope tied around me so I can get back out again, I'm not going to experience the cave in the same way as if I'm in and that's it. There's no way back. The experience is definitely going to be different, but it gives us hints. It gives us some hints, and there's a lot of similarities between it. That there's something to be said for that, right? Then the other source of information for these kinds of things, the primary source of information in near-death experiences, it's not over, right? It's not over yet. There's also the Tibetan Book of the Dead, which is an in-depth discussion about it, as it's seen from the point of view of Tibetan Buddhism. There's been writings and talks about it from sages and saints from time immemorial. But again, that's secondhand information that's useful as a pointer. But how does one come to a conclusion about it? How can one say that without having died, right? Or even had a near-death experience? Right? How can one say that? Well, I'm going back to the experience I'm actually having right now in any given moment. And that experience tells me all that I need, because from moment to moment is like a birth and a death, right? The scene in front of me is constantly changing. This flash of now is now gone, and the next one hasn't arrived, and I don't really know what that next one is going to be. I hope it's similar to this one, so I don't feel all discombobulated, but I don't actually really I don't know what's going to come. All I know is what's happening right now. And what I'm looking at is this constant churning, this constant flux, this constant change taking place. And I can quite literally say that, that past moment is it's dead. It's passed away. I can never regain it. Right? I have a memory of it, but the memory of it is always in the now, and it's always quite, it's not really that trustworthy. It's always getting colored by the now, especially the further away the memory gets, until it just disappears into nothingness, right? Which we would regard as past lives. So how then? So what it really means is this theme of birth and death that we think of as being the end of this particular cycle of life, this particular name and form, right? But that's just a metaphor for what's happening all the time. The 5-year-old version of me is dead. It's gone, right? Now, did he die? No, right? Or did he? Right? I'm nothing like that anymore. I don't. I've been through, the 5-year-old. I've been through what, 7, 10 bodies, 9 bodies since complete overhauls since then. Right? All sorts of things have changed, including my voice. It used to sound quite different, right? So if we look at it as a theme, as a metaphor, we can begin to say, well, what hasn't changed? Because all of this has changed, and all of my efforts to control it have been futile, temporary at best. I managed to hold some things together for a while, and then they eventually have fallen apart. Can I choose what my next moment's going to be? That was this question regarding the period between death and birth. Can I choose what my next life is going to be? Can you choose what your next dream is going to be? Can you choose what that next moment's actually going to contain? Well, the answer is no, not really. But what is there, right? That is stable. That's the first. And then what do I really have at my disposal to work with, knowing that there's just this constant flow, this constant flux going. Well, I'm sure all of you have seen the Star Wars movie. And the second one, The Empire Strikes Back, where Luke goes to, maybe it's the third one, Return of the Jedi, where he goes to his training with Yoda. And there's one scene where Yoda says it's time for him. He has to go into the cave. He has to go by himself into the cave. It's this dark, smelly cave. Right? Now, first off, going into the cave alone, or going into the forest alone, or going into the ocean alone, has been a mythological theme, a device for forever. And it specifies going into the dark parts of ourselves. And Luke asks the question, what's in the cave? And Buddha answers, only what you bring with you. So what goes into death? The death of this moment, or the death of all of this particular cycle? The answer is only what you bring with you. And what that means is bringing with you, holding on to. As I mentioned in kind of the opening comments I was making, that unwittingly we hold on to being somebody, being a separate self. Now that can be extremely a tight grip, right? Which of course will go into the next lifetime. It will keep manifesting itself, right? Because there's nothing about that particular, there's no more significance to that transition than there is a significance to the transition into puberty. There's the change itself does not cause these fundamental energies to be altered. Yeah, things do change, when you enter into puberty. Yeah, things change, but a lot of the stuff that we hold on to, a lot of it we let go of. But there are these very fundamental things that run through our entire life that we don't see, that we don't, and therefore do not scrutinize, that we hold on to unwittingly, which is what I was talking about in the very beginning, at the very deep sense. In each lifetime, right? If we have been, if we've been truly devoted, or not even truly, it's somewhat devoted, somewhere along the line, you got the spiritual message, right? And it resonated deeply enough that lifetime after lifetime, you've been cultivating this rarefied sattvic character, right? And it has freed you from many of the things that have gone lifetime to lifetime to lifetime. You know, vows and deep traumas and things like that. But it keeps getting down to more and more and more fundamental stuff. So, does individuality persist after death? Was the question. Do our thoughts and actions have impact on the next life? Only what you hold on to. Right? That's it. The next birth will be made out of whatever has not yet been yielded up to the reality of your being that is deathless. Right? So the experience of life and death, right? Who's having that experience? Is the character in the movie experiencing the movie? Can the characters in a book get together and complain to the author that they don't like the ending? Where's the actual author of this? And I think if you look, you can see that there's a very personal sense that wants to control, makes the next life better, which actually will lead me into the next question as soon as I make sure I've covered this all. But what I want you to point your attention to is the birth and death is not a moment in time. It is the nature of time itself. Things are always ending and beginning, ending and beginning, ending and beginning, so fast that we don't even notice them. One of the great insights that came from the quantum theory is the fact that things just appear and disappear. They come into existence and go out of existence at that level. Things don't appear to be happening like that at this level, but in order for this level to even exist, that must be happening on that level. And there's a dimension that's even more subtle than that. So these things that are coming in and out of existence, what's noticing that they're coming in and out of existence? There must be something that is not coming in and out of existence, something that is not dying and being born again. Right? There must be. Right? And so this is where I point attention to, because that's not something you have to wait till later to experience, because you're experiencing it right now. If you realize that the flow of time is the wheel of time, is Shiva's wheel, is the cycle, the repetitive cycle of birth and death, then you watch and say, well, what's the hub around which this wheel is spinning? What is it that is aware of all of this change? Is that changing? And you can be aware of that right now, right here, because you're experiencing it. It's only our concepts that say what we're experiencing is something static, is something consistent, right? Is it? It's clear that it's not. When I'm looking at the tree I have outside, or the plants behind me, right? I'm getting, it's not a static image. I'm getting a constantly refreshed image, aren't I? Light is a wave that is traveling. If it wasn't, if I turned out the light, I'd only need, turn it on once and then turn it off, because the light's now just sitting here, right? It's a constant thing. This is what everything is. So I'm not seeing the plant. I'm seeing an image of the plant that's constantly being refreshed. Right? That's a life and death. This is the cycle. Right? Everything is a wave. Nothing is static. Nothing actually exists at all. If you want to take it to the ultimate. So look to right here and right now for the birth and death that is happening. What am I bringing into the next moment? Right? What is it that I'm holding on to that I'm not aware that I'm holding on to, that is going into the next moment, which is shaping my perception, which shapes my experience. Right? And once seen, right, can I let go of it? Right? But first, there must be the willingness to see it, to actually look vigilantly for that which is not changing. It is not subject to birth and death. And if you can find that, it means that you must be that. Because if it isn't subject to birth and death, it means it is here, now, always. Which means if you find it, it must be you. The real you, not the you think you are. That is always subject to birth and death. And it'll always be seeking better karma, a better birth, merits, right? So next lifetime, I'll have a better teacher. Next lifetime, I'll meet a guru, a Buddha or a Christ or something like that. Let me take up the next question.